ladies and gentlemen. So back to back, 2 presentations in a row. So the next presentation I'm doing is on projectile design. Now what I'd originally planned to do is a full reloading instruction up here on stage, but unfortunately logistically we can't do that. So I'm going to give a presentation on projectile design still. And projectile design is one of the key choices that you're going to have to make when you start reloading your ammunition, or indeed if you're buying factory ammunition and you need a certain performance out of it. So, okay. So when you're looking at projectile design, you want to use the best projectile. But what is the best projectile and how do we choose that? And what makes a good projectile? So in the previous presentation, I was talking to you guys about external performance and terminal performance. External performance being the performance of the projectile when it leaves the barrel to when it strikes the target. Terminal performance is what happens to a projectile once it enters an animal. So if you're hunting, you need to consider both of those things, but if you're target shooting, you don't need to consider terminal performance. So, what's needed in projectile accuracy? So what we didn't touch on then is also the other thing that a projectile needs is precision. And definitely 10 or 15 years ago, there were certain choices that you had to make and certain give and takes that you had to have. But nowadays, projectile design has advanced to a point that even some of the cheapest projectiles on the market, Nosler RDF or Nosler Barmageddon, some of the Hornady range of projectiles are all made to such a point that pretty much any projectile you can guarantee that has a high level of precision in its manufacture, meaning that you can shoot a very tight group with it. But when we talk about accuracy, accuracy is the ability of the shooter to shoot the rifle, not the ability of the rifle to shoot. So when we talk about accuracy and the ability of the shooter, is the ability of the shooter to know where that bullet is going to land at long range. In how much drop does the bullet have? How much is it affected by wind? And these things are all external ballistics. And there's definitely certain designs of projectiles that you can get to optimize the external ballistics. The other thing that we need to think about is the stopping power, or the terminal performance. Stopping power, or terminal performance, is the ability of the projectile to dump its energy in the vital areas of the animal. Not on the outside of the animal, not penetrate all the way through the animal, because whatever the energy is left in the projectile is wasted once it exits the animal, but to deliver the energy to the vital areas. So, again, it's very important for you to decide exactly what it is that you want to do, or what you want that projectile to do, before making a choice. Are you long-range target shooting? Are you short-range target shooting? Are you hunting? If you want a projectile to do all of those things, then you're going to have to narrow your selection right down. If you're long-range target shooting, you need a projectile with a high ballistic coefficient. Ballistic coefficient is how efficient the bullet flies through the air. The higher the ballistic coefficient, the more energy the bullet retains, the more velocity the bullet retains, the flatter the bullet fires, and the less wind drift that the projectile has. So, select your projectile based on the features of the projectile itself. External ballistics. Optimum external ballistics is basically high ballistic coefficient, high sectional density, which is sort of the same thing. Practicality of the projectile. So the projectile doesn't just have to be a really good design. You have to open the projectiles up and see how they're constructed inside. Now, a projectile that's sold on its features may sound really good, but you might actually find internally it's not structured the way it needs to shoot the game that you want to shoot. If it's not, maybe some projectiles have to be bonded to penetrate through tough hide, through fat and muscle and bone. So, one of the main points that we're going to cover today is the ogive design of the projectile. So the ogive of the projectile is the taper on the nose of the projectile, and the way that that taper happens. So there's two main tapers, two main ogives. The first is a tangent ogive and the second is a secant ogive. And I think I've got a picture. Okay, maybe I don't. No, I don't. Okay, so a tangent ogive projectile is one where the ogive, the taper of the projectile, meets the parallel side of the projectile at an angle of 0 degrees. So the side of the wall of the side of the projectile tapers directly straight rounded into the nose. Examples are stuff like nozzle ballistic tips, pretty much most of the nozzle projectiles, Sierra projectiles, all tangent ogive projectiles. A secant ogive projectile is one where the ogive meets the wall of the projectile at an angle. And you can actually see a very defined shoulder on the projectile. They call that the conical transition. And that secant ogive projectile, they're typically longer than tangent ogive projectiles. So you sometimes have trouble fitting them in the magazines. But because they're longer, they have a higher ballistic coefficient. So we look at the pros and cons. If you look at the BC of projectile, tangent ogive projectiles have a lower BC than secant ogive projectiles. You look at tangent ogive projectiles, they have a loopier trajectory. Secant ogive projectiles shoot flatter and retain their energy and their velocity for longer. And tangent ogive projectiles are affected more by wind than secant ogive projectiles. So, when we're looking at the bullet and how it flies through the air, it flies in an arc, as you can see on the thing there. So for a majority of its travel, the bullet will be going entirely supersonic, which means that the entire projectile is going faster than the speed of sound. Now there's an area between where the projectile is travelling supersonic and where it's traveling subsonic, and this area is called the transonic zone. And it's during the transonic zone when a lot of projectiles become unstable. When they become unstable, they tumble and you lose the projectile. Then they travel into the subsonic zone and then they land on the ground. Now, if we look at the transonic zone of different projectiles, tangent and secant line projectiles, tangent ogive projectiles in the transonic zone will still group, whereas secant ogive projectiles will not. And the reason for that is that tangent ogive projectiles with their round nose have a lot more weight in the front of the projectile. With a secant ogive projectile with a slender nose, there's more weight in the back of the projectile. Where there's more weight in the back of the projectile, the back of the project wants to go first and they're more likely to tumble. So if you're planning on shooting into the transonic zone, so if you've got a 308 for example, which are usually supersonic, like with a 175 grainer about 900 metres, and if you want to shoot to 1,000 metres, well then you're better off shooting a tangent ogive projectile. Yes, the BC is not going to be as high. Yes, it's going to be affected by wind more, but it will group better at long range than say a Hornady projectile, which has got a long slender nose and they tumble as soon as they hit transonic zone. Okay, so this is just an example of the two different projectiles. So you can see on the right here, we've got a tangent ogive projectile. So that's typically like a Nosler or a Sierra competition projectile. Whereas on the left, we've got a Berger VLD projectile, which is a secant ogive projectile. Yeah. And you can see that it's got a definite shoulder where the side of the projectile meets the ogive. That definite shoulder is called that conical transition. So, and when these bullets sit in the chamber, now we're looking at sort of concern with this. When the bullets sit in the chamber, a tangent ogive projectile engages in the rifling quite well, whereas the secant ogive projectile engages in the rifling on that conical transition first. So if you've got a projectile that starts not in the centre of the barrel but off to the side, or in the case of most cartridges, if the bullet is laying in the bottom of the chamber, the bullet starts off centre, a tangent ogive projectile will actually align itself correctly before it travels down the barrel. A secant ogive projectile will not do this. A secant ogive projectile engages the rifling incorrectly and will travel down the barrel that way. It'll straighten itself up once it comes out the end of the barrel, but usually your accuracy is lost by that point. And that is why most bench rest shooters, up until recently anyway, most bench rest shooters shoot with a bullet with a tangent ogive and a rounded nose and a flat barrel shooter. So what does this mean? So what it means is that tangent ogive projectiles, so Sierras and nozzles and those sorts of things, are very insensitive. So you can just make a load up and shoot them and they will shoot accurately. A secant ogive projectile like a Burger or a Hornady takes a lot more development to get it to shoot really well. So, and which is point number 2, you have to really tune your loads with secant ogive projectiles. In some instances, secant ogive projectiles won't shoot until you make them jump up to 3mm into the rifle. A huge gap between from when they start to when they enter the rifle. We can also get around this with custom rifle building with throat design. Up until recently, relatively recently, most throat designs have all been about 1.5 degrees of angle. New throat designs for BLD projectiles would go to a 3 degrees throat angle. And that allows the shooting of secant ogive projectiles with much better accuracy. The other thing that we're doing now is more and more bullet manufacturers are making hybrid design projectiles. Projectiles that start with a tangent ogive where they engrave in the rifling and then change to a secant ogive projectile. So you get the best of both worlds. You'll also have to consider your magazine on. If you're shooting a secant ogive projectile, it's a very long projectile. You may not be able to fit it inside the magazine. You may have to push it right back inside the case to get it to fit in the magazine. And if you're doing that, you're chewing up powder capacity and you're making the bullet inefficient. So to summarise this side of the presentation, you need to consider what's important for you. Wind drift. If you're shooting long range, you are going to encounter wind. And if you want to keep wind drift down, you're better going for a secant ogive projectile. Flat trajectory. If you need to shoot out to say 300 metres or so, and you don't want to have to hold off as much, a secant ogive projectile has less drop. Transonic stability. If you're going to shoot into the transonic zone, so with the 308, if you're going to shoot out to about 900 or 1,000 metres, with a 300 mag, if you want to try and get out to sort of 1,300 to 1,500 metres, then you're going to need a bullet that handles the transonic zone really well. Short range accuracy. Secant ogive projectiles do not shoot as well as tangent ogive projectiles at short range. The other thing is that most secant ogive projectiles have got boat tails because they're designed for long range shooting. And when a bullet manufacturer puts a boat tail on a projectile, they introduce an extra machining step in the bullet manufacture process. And each machining step has its own tolerances associated with that. So by putting a boat tail on a projectile, you actually make them less accurate. Flat-based projectiles generally shoot better than boat tail projectiles at short range. And ease of loading. Okay, external ballistics for hunting. If you need accuracy and energy at long range, then obviously you need a projectile with a higher BC. So selecting a good high BC projectile, like a Hornady or something like that, is important. If you're shooting at short range, then choosing a bullet with a nice rounded nose. If you're wanting to mitigate ricochet, so if you're shooting on a very flat area, you haven't got a very positive backstop most of the time, and you want to reduce the ricochet, you need to select a projectile with a tangent ogive. Tangent ogives are rounder on the front, they're less likely to ricochet. Secant ogive, because they're nice and long and slender, they tend to ricochet off rocks. They also tend to ricochet off bone, so the bullets don't end up where you want them to. Penetration and magazine length, which we've already covered. Terminal performance. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're shooting game and what sort of performance you want. Most people focus on external performance, on the ability to hit the animal, without thinking what the bullet does when it hits the animal and whether it delivers the energy when you want it or not. So there's a lot of things to consider. What game you're hunting, what kind of rest you're using. If you've got a really steady rest and you can place your shots really well, say in the head, then you're going to need a projectile that can penetrate through a skull. But if you're shooting offhand and you're taking body shots, you don't necessarily need to penetrate through bone unless you're shooting front on. Can you manoeuvre for a better shot? How flighty or agitated is your game? Is it likely to run? How heavy is the brush that you're trying to shoot through? So if you're shooting through heavy brush, you want a nice, hard, brown-nosed projectile that'll punch through the brush without ricocheting off. Do you need to track a wounded animal? And this is very important. If you're tracking a wounded animal, what do we use to track wounded animals? We generally use a blood trail. If you've shot an animal and you've got a hole inside of it and it's bleeding out of that blood trail, you've got a blood trail to follow. If you've penetrated all the way through the animal and the bullet has exited, you've got 2 blood trails to follow. So if you're hunting game on foot a lot and you're likely to have a game at least run partially, so if you're shooting like an antelope species, which are quite tough, and they're going to run 10 or 15 metres before they drop, it's a good idea to have a projectile that penetrates all the way through the animal and exits. So you've got a better trail to follow. Is the animal dangerous? Obviously, if you're shooting dangerous game, you need a very different projectile than if you're shooting large game. And what distances will you be hunting over? Okay, so there's a massive projectile selection out there, but I have broken them up into 7 main groups, which we're going to go through now, which are the most fragile to the least fragile design. So one of these groups of projectiles will be the best for what you want to do, whatever game you're hunting. And the first one is, number 1, consistently thin jackets. And this is quite typical of competition projectiles. They have a consistent jacket thickness the whole way around. They've got a non-bonded core, so the jacket and the core are not bonded to each other, and they fragment violently on impact. Examples are Hornady VMAX, Nozzle of Armageddon, Sierra Blitzkin. The next one is a controlled expansion projectile. Thin tapered jacket, so the jacket starts off thin at the mouth and tapers up to thick in the walls and usually have a thick base of copper as well. They've got a non-bonded core, and a good example is nozzle ballistic tip. So nozzle ballistic tips are actually quite hard as far as projectiles go, good for medium-sized game. Number 3, a tapered jacket design, again, not bonded, but has an internal lock ring or canniloil. And that locks the core of the projectile to the jacket. So if you hit something hard like bone, the jacket isn't going to separate from the core. Because if the jacket separates from the core, you lose all your energy. Number 4 is your tapered jacket bonded core design. So this is where they start bonding the core of the projectile to the jacket itself. And it's done through several different ways. You can do it with a hot process, you can do it with a chemical process. So examples are nozzle AccuBond, Swiss Scirocco, and the Spear hot core. So the nozzle AccuBond, they bond the core and the jacket with a chemical process, so they will not separate, no matter what you hit. Very high weight retention. This is when we're starting to get into larger game, and definitely game that's predated on heavily, such as antelope species. Numbers, Roscoe. There we go. So separate core design. So controlled expansion with a solid shank. So you can see that these projectiles have a partition through the middle, which is where the nozzle partition gets its name. So the front end of the projectile works like a soft point. So it mushrooms, it opens up, it forms a bigger projectile than the projectile that you fired, and which does more damage as it travels through the animal. But if you hit something hard like a bone, the soft point will shear off, but the rear of the projectile acts like a full metal jacket and will just keep going. So much deeper penetration. Number 6 is monolithic projectiles. When we say monolithic, what we mean is it's made from one material, typically copper. So they're actually turned, they're not swaged. And controlled expansion, usually these projectiles, they've usually got skies on the nose of the projectile that help it from opening up, like the Barnes TSX is a good example of that. And examples are also the Nosler E-tip and the Hornady GMX. So solid copper design, really good on large game. And the last example is the full metal jacket, the solid. It's not made to expand, it's made to penetrate. It's made to go all the way through an animal. It's made to go through mud, through bone, through hide, through skin, through muscle, and get into the vital areas of the animal. very important if you're hunting dangerous game, something that wants to eat you. So, when you're looking at a projectile design, have a look at the features of the projectile. Does it have a solid copper base or is it a thin copper base? That'll control how well it expands. The skiving on the nose affects how quickly the bullet expands. If you're hunting thin-skinned game, you want the projectile to open up straight away. If you're hunting a thick-skinned game, you don't want the projectile to open up straight away because you waste all that energy on the skin and hide of the animal. Some projectiles have got harder alloys in there. They advertise that they've got harder alloys. The harder alloys hold together better for better penetration. And some of them have got plastic tips. That increases the ballistic coefficient and helps start the mushrooming process of the nose of the projectile. So, just going to dispel a couple of myths. Everyone comes into the shop and says they want ballistic tips. Ballistic tip is a term that was coined by Nosler. It's not a term to describe all plastic tip projectiles because they all behave very differently. So when you say ballistic tip, you're actually talking a medium game, a relatively tough projectile, when most people think plastic tip projectiles are all the same, they all fragment pretty quickly. It's not true. Heavier projectiles with higher sectional density penetrate further. Not necessarily true, because that doesn't say anything about how the projectile is constructed inside, how thick is the jacket. You can have a 30 cal, 210 grain match projectile that doesn't penetrate as far as a 30 cal, 150 grain controlled expansion hunting projectile. Heavier projectiles need faster twist rate barrels. No, yes, but no. So, the twist rate of the barrel is not relative to the weight of the projectile, it's relative to the length of the projectile. The longer the bullet, the faster you need to spin it to stabilise it. Now, generally speaking, for the same diameter projectile, if the heavier they are, the longer they are, but it depends on the design of the projectile. If it's got a boat tail, it'll be longer. If it's got a secant ogive, it'll be longer, and you need a faster twist barrel. But generally speaking, heavier projectiles don't necessarily mean faster twist rates. Monolithic projectiles are very light, but they're very long and need fast twist rate barrels to shoot them accurately. So, bullets with more energy or velocity penetrate further. One of the big myths, if you look at three common calibers, 308 Winchester, 30-06 and 300 Win Mag. A 308 Winchester shoots 150 grain pill, the same speed a 30-06 shoots 180 grain pill. A 30-06 shoots 150 grain pill, the same speed a 300 Win Mag shoots 180 grain pill. So it's a very even sort of distribution between those three calibers. But the one with the best penetration out of those three is the 30-06, the one in the middle. And that's because most projectiles were made to suit the velocities that 30-06 fires projectiles are. 300 Win Mag penetrates less because the bullets are going faster, they're spinning faster, they become unstable quicker, they mushroom more, and they dump their energy earlier. Yeah? So velocity doesn't necessarily, and energy doesn't necessarily mean dropping power or penetration or anything like that. It comes more down to the construction of the projectile. And boat tails make projectiles more accurate. That's only true after 300 metres. After 300 metres, the bullet starts to slow down. All of a sudden, the environmental effects have a lot bigger effect on the projectile, and a boat tail does increase the ballistic coefficient by reducing the drag on the back of the projectile. So after that distance, yes, boat tails make projectiles more accurate, but generally speaking, like I said before, boat tails are an extra machining process in bullet manufacture. They can actually make projectiles less accurate. Okay? So if you're not shooting past 400 metres, a flat-based projectile may actually be better for you. Which is why I was really happy when Nosler brought out their Varmageddon projectiles. Varmints, they generally don't shoot them past 300 metres. Their ballistic tip projectiles all had boat tails on for no real reason. The Varmageddon came out with a flat base, much better design. So I was really happy about that. So, thanks very much again for your time, guys, and thanks to Glenn who helped me with the original writing of this presentation. Has anyone got any questions in relation to projectile design or the best projectile for your certain gun or caliber or the game that you're shooting? No worries, guys. Make sure you come up to me afterwards if you've got any questions. Thank you.